Hello and welcome to The Reset, a mental health podcast without all the bollocks. I'm Sam Delaney. My guest this week is David Charkham, also known as the rock and roll recovery coach. He's worked with numerous famous faces over the years, helping them get and stay sober. He's even the man who managed to get Ozzy Osbourne to knock the drink on the head. After his own battle with addiction, David developed his recovery skills program in 1989. He's often described as the grandfather of UK recovery coaches. He's also an actor, known for old classics, including 2001 Space Odyssey, Crossroads, and two of the most iconic musicals of the 70s, Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar. Yet, he's a man who has lived a big life, and he's picked up a huge amount of wisdom along the way, some of which he was kind enough to share with me on this week's episode. I hope you enjoy listening. David, welcome to The Reset.
Thank you very much. Hello.
What a honour to have you on the show. You've been referred to by some as the grandfather of recovery coaches. How do you feel about that?
Old. No, it's actually, it is a compliment because I started doing it, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago. And there was nothing in the English vocabulary: recovery coach, sober companion. Those words didn't exist. And that's what I was doing, but it didn't have a title. But yeah, I've been supporting people, whether they're on the road, they're performers, or high-flying executives, or people in public places, rather anonymously for, a couple of decades now. That's part of my day job.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot that this coach word gets thrown around a lot now. I don't know how you feel about that, because it's almost when something expands to the extent that it seems to have done. I suppose for someone with a legacy like yours, who's been doing it for a long time, you might worry that it's been compromised. I mean, what do you see a recovery coach as being? How would you define the role?
Well, and that's a really good question. Thank you for asking. The role is support, is understanding, is empathy, it's sympathy, it's a knowledge of the recovery world. The client may need some kind of debriefing because they've heard about the 12-step movement. It is all that support and understanding and friendship, stroke, maybe sometimes, I suppose, when I've been on world tours in some pretty far-flung places, it may be a form of temporary sponsorship. I guess in some cases, in the early days, before I really defined my role, and a very high-profile young performer, I suppose in a way I was a bit of a surrogate dad as well.
Yeah.
But that is decades ago. And as you so importantly asked, what's happened since? It's changed. So basically, yes, there are things that wind me up because, and I'm sure some of them are well-meaning, good and productive and safe. But there seemed to be a trend of things called, academies, sober coaching academy. And as I understood it then, you could just attend, pay your money and get a certificate. And that certificate would state that you are a qualified sober coach. The thing that I felt very strongly, because I worked 22 years in the NHS, and we would often have this discussion: how long sober or clean does someone have to be to work with addicts in the NHS or any? So I was concerned. I didn't know whether there was a standard that if you wanted to get out there live and coach people, how much clean time you needed. So it's turned. I mean, the whole of the treatment world, when I went into treatment in 1986, there were 3 rehabs in Europe. That was it. Certainly only supported the 12 steps. And my observations is it's now a huge industry. It's a huge industry. So there'll always be a place for sober coaching. And yes, now, of course, the qualifications needed if you were starting now, you would need everything from basic kind of life-saving knowledge to what you do if someone has a fit, the health and safety aspect, which, again, that didn't exist in 88, 89, health and safety. So anyway, I hope I'm not jabbering on, but my point is, I have mixed feelings about it, but there are reputable organisations that supply sober coaches. But I have a very strong feeling about the amount of supervision these sober coaches get. Because if you're doing, as a therapist, one-to-one sessions, it's over. You do your hour, it's over. And and you have your weekly supervision, you're on the road for 3 months. It can get a bit hairy. Especially you might be working with someone who, the artist would like to get clean, the manager would like them to get clean, but the crew and the band are just used to this artist being, happy, lucky, and high as a kite, and it all kind of fitted. And the dynamics can change dramatically when suddenly the main person changes their lifestyle. But I mean, I've been fortunate enough to do it, and to do it, it's been the people that I've worked with, they've had successful outcomes. But like everybody seeking recovery, they get it when they're ready, not necessarily when their manager or the record company or their wives or their jobs get it. Does that make sense?
It does, totally, yeah. But I'm fascinated by the idea of you being on tour, caught between these kind of different aspects of the rock and roll world, and what it's like for you personally. Because, like, are you seen as the prefect? Are you seen? Do you get negative vibes in these situations as, oh, he's the guy who's here to piss on our disco? What's that like?
That's a good thing. Fortunately, I've been lucky enough, as I've got more experience, to pick and choose. I can afford to pick and choose who I want to work with. And I don't. And if I sniff any of that, sniff's not the most appropriate. But if I get downwind of anyone who sees me as a threat, what is that all about? And I'm too old to go on the road and be put to the back, like that. I'm not up for it. However, younger people, ex clients of mine, have got into recovery, done their training, got this, and occasionally they ring me up. And there might be some really high-profile performer who's sort of known, part of his sort of attraction, quote unquote, is, hey, I'm getting high. And I had to be very blunt with this gentleman who asked me for help. I said, I'm going to be very blunt. And I knew of the client, his prospective client, and it didn't really sound like he wanted to get well. It may have been the record company, the insurance, because when we're getting into big tours, big money, the insurers have to make sure their artist isn't going to blow up in the middle of a tour, because these tours, as you know, and the crew and the band and the transport and the private jets and all that stuff, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I had to say to this guy, I said, well, yes, it can be really enjoyable. And then I said to him, but are you prepared to have your client die on you? Now, that's a pretty dramatic thing to say. But I knew that this particular artist was not well, that was maintaining. And the poor chap that I asked me for advice, he ended up not even being connected to the artist. He was put at the back of the back bus. When the essence of true sober companioning, you travel with the artist. It's you and the artist wherever you're part of the inner circle.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound too negative about this stuff, because there's hundreds of people doing it. It can work really, really well, and it's needed.
Yes. I suppose what I thought was, what about the artist might, like you say, the artist might be very enthusiastic and love the work you're doing, and it might be going very well. But I'm saying the band or other certain people on the tour might resent your presence, because you think, well, he's taking the artist away from us.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think when I first started doing it, the artist was definitely up for it. His manager was up for it. And I think the crew took a bit of, I mean, there was not much education about this kind of stuff. But what happened, because I remember, because we had a plane, which was really nice. There was like just 6 of us on the plane. But then we'd be going, I don't know, somewhere like Nebworth or something. We'd be going one of those tour buses, and the band would be there, and they understood that the artist didn't want any alcohol on the bus.
Mm.
That was it.
Yeah.
And they respected it. Bottom line, this was their bread and butter. It's in their interest that the artist can stay on the road as long as possible because it's their bread and butter. But I have heard, fortunately, no personal experience, but I have heard of difficult situations where indeed the sober companion, but oh my God, here's the Dr. Killjoy and all that kind of stuff. And also the see, when you're in the bubble of superstardom, you can be in the bubble, and in that bubble, there's not often people are going to look you the artist straight in the eye and go, "Don't be such a wanker."
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in the interest of those people who were all earning from the artist. But I hope I'm not painting a too dark a picture, because I've seen it work, and I've done those tours, and we've done some of those big concerts. I mean, in England, but there's something called Roskilde in Denmark, which is a massive 250,000 people with loads and loads of artists. And like Glastonbury, there's a backstage meeting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not so weird now. It's not like, oh my God, this artist doesn't drink. But it was pretty wild and pretty woolly when I started in the 1990s.
1990s. So, I mean, here's a big question that seems relevant now. Is like I've written and spoken a lot on the Reset about the idea of wild man creativity, wild man artists. The idea that, you know, having these appetites for alcohol, drugs, and whatever else is an essential part of your artistic personality and almost fuels your creativity. This is what so many creative people believe when they are locked in addiction. And this must be something in the early stages of your work that you come up against a lot. People think, if I stop doing this, I won't be able to create.
A great question. Have you read Eric Clapton's autobiography?
I haven't.
Well, give it a read, because I knew Eric in the 60s, the late 60s, because I was a performer in those days, and we had the same management. And then we met up in recovery, and when he opened Crossroads in Antigua, his rehab, he asked me. I went out there and did some work. So we've had those discussions. Do you think you were more creative when you were high than you weren't? And I mean, it's all there in that book. And it certainly didn't, with the artists of that caliber, it was not a negative impact on their career or their creativity when they started pouring huge amounts of chemicals into their system. But we were all, when we were that high, we were all under the impression that we were just the greatest thing since Coca-Cola, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And personally, I thought, how could you possibly like me if I wasn't the charismatic David Charkham, high on cocaine, all the drinks?
Yeah.
And that was in my early, not before my professional career, just as an early recovering addict alcoholic. And because I've been a child actor, it took some time for me to look at you, Sam, and say, well, how could you like me if you haven't seen me if you're not seeing me on the telly anymore?
Yeah.
And Sandy Shaw, who was a performer on one Eurovision in the 60s, became a psychologist, and we met up because we were interested in each other's work. This is way back. And I think she told me that when she got her thesis as a psychologist, it was called The Mood-Altering Effect of Fame. And I find that a really fascinating subject.
That is, yeah, really interesting.
And that's what I've seen, and my experience is a little bit personally, but not on the grand scale of the people that I've worked for. Fame is a double-edged sword.
Yeah. But do you have to, is this something you have to address when you meet an artist who has pledged, wants to make a commitment to recovery, but they have these fears? Is that something you have to go back and forth with them about?
Yes, it is. But I think their fears is, oh my God, what happens if someone sees me in a meeting
Yeah.
what people think. And like when I was in rehab and I was still an actor, I said, how can I be sober? I'm an actor. How am I going to get work not hanging out in the bar or the BBC or Pinewood? And because they said to me quite rightly, oh, David, you know, there's quite a lot of actors in recovery. You know? So it kind of helps them. So what I would do with an artist, I may well introduce them to another artist that I work that's been in the public or is in the public eye, and that diffuses, because ultimately, God forbid someone should see you getting sober, or i.e., God forbid someone should see you saving your life. The only thing that I'm rather sensitive around is it's everywhere. It's all public domain. Very much in America, everyone, they out themselves, fine, that's all okay. But, and there have been incidences this year where a super famous person who's in recovery has relapsed and died. What is that? What message? If they've gone on telly or made done public chairs, I'm in recovery, this is great. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Very, yeah.
And how much it's a personal choice. But the essence, if you go into the 12-step movement, is anonymity. And the founder, the part of the last words, I believe, that Bill Wilson said at the end of his life, what's the most important thing about Alcoholics Anonymous? I think he said the word anonymity. It's very, very difficult. So I'm David Charkham. I'm a recovering addict, and I share that, and I'm proud about that. But it can be a two-edged sword, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for yourself and for the wider public perception of AA, of recovery, of all those things. I feel, I don't know, you know, I started my sobriety began in 2015. I feel like that was around a time that maybe my perspective is skewed, but I feel as if the anonymity is less important to a lot of people than it once was. And is that because, was it different getting sober in the 90s or the 80s and before that? And also, is that just because society's changed and become a little bit more accepting of addiction?
I think you've got a very good point. I think you've got a very, very good point. And also with social media, and it's all out there. So yes, I think you've got a good point. You may well be right. But I think in the early days, well, for me, what was I worried about? Oh, I know what I was most worried about. It was almost like, okay, he's an alcoholic. But for me, I was thinking the public or people who knew me, the stigma, the difference. There's the alcoholic, but then there's a drug addict. Then there's a dirty drug addict.
Yeah.
But that's 37 years ago. It's all out there. Look,
very different.
You had Hello Magazine. Then you had the internet. Then you have Facebook. Then you've got ZXY, whatever the Elon Musk's little operation is called. I'm not a Twitterer. Facebook and an email.
Well, that's almost certainly a positive thing.
But I think, it's very valuable what you've said, and it may listen. I'm an old fart. I'm 75 for God's sake.
Tell me a bit about your own experience of addiction and recovery.
Well, I started getting high in the 60s, and it's not often mentioned, but I'm the first generation of Englishmen that didn't get conscripted into the military.
Right.
So I'm part of that explosion, because before that, every young man with all their ideas and all their artistic impulses, you went into the army or you went into the military. I kind of think some of the outrageousness, if you like, might have got suppressed or a bit knocked out. So there we were the first generation. So you got the music, you got the fashion, you got the photography, you got the architecture, you got the art. I was blessed to be part of that 60s explosion. And I started getting high. It must have been around 64, 65. Was I born a drug addict, alcoholic? I don't know. There was nothing obvious in my immediate family. I had a loving family. At 14, I was an impressionable kid, and my heroes were getting high. It was very, very attractive. But somewhere between 1965 and 1986, I crossed the invisible line, Sam. When I started, I was using it. But by the time I'm poured into Cloud's house in 1986, it was using me. And somewhere, Sam, I crossed that invisible line. But it worked for the first few years. And I didn't know until I was in rehab writing my life story that I've been very fortunate and I'd had a successful career. I knew I worked as a kid, kids' TV and films and West End and radio. I mean, I did a lot of work, but I didn't really get it until I lost it all, and then got sober. That's a very mini chair, and I got it. You know what, Sam? I got it. Well, this is the difference. And for people I work with, you can go in and you could say, David, your life, you're destroying life. You need to stop. And I might go in to please you or a family member or to keep the job or to keep record sales or something. And I go, hi, my name's David. I'm an addict. It was only when I went, hi, my name's David. I'm an addict. And I surrender. So when I threw the towel in, life started to change beyond my wildest dreams. But I had wonderful role models. Lionel Bart, who I got high with in 65, I turned on with in 1965. He drove me to rehab in 1986.
Wow.
So he was like a mentor and also a wonderful man. They're both sadly missed. They help me a lot. But Sam, the biggest shock for me is I thought, well, you go into rehab, you clean up your act, and the career's going to come back. No such thing happened. I was very angry because I thought I deserved. It was my ego speaking. But, well, I should get it all back now. I'm not getting out of it.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I've missed the boat. I couldn't play the boy next door like I did in Bless This House. I was in my 30s, and I didn't look. The hair was going, and I didn't have the look, and I didn't have the confidence. And remember that fearlessness of youth that we all didn't have it. And boy, was I angry, and I had to face the reality of walking down Shaftesbury Avenue and looking up at the names over the titles in the theatre, starring this or featuring that. And I'd look up at those titles and I'd see those names and I'd go, that bastard was my understudy when I was in Hair. Or name above the title. That bastard, that producer, he was the third assistant stage manager when I was in Jesus Christ Superstar. There was ego stuff going on.
Yeah.
And Dudley, God bless him, saw me because I couldn't get arrested as an actor, but I get to work as an extra. Okay, I appreciated the 60 quid a day for standing in the rain for 8 hours. I appreciated that because I was skint and on the dole. And I said, Dudley, look, I'm doing all the things I'm meant to do. I'm following the suggestions. I'm going to meetings. I've got a sponsor. I'm not picking up, blah, blah, blah. What's happened? Why haven't I got my career? He smiled. He had a beatific smile, Dudley, sometimes described as a battered cherub. He said, David, have you ever considered that a power greater than you has got bigger plans for you than you could possibly understand today? Dudley tells me this stuff in 1987. And here I am, 2024, a career that I invented.
Yeah.
And how the hell the NHS, they took a gamble. They employed me. I haven't got a certificate to my name, maybe a tap dancing certificate. I was thrown out of school before O-levels, no real education, but they knew that I had a gift, which I didn't know. And that was all based on when you leave rehab, the protective bubble of rehab, are you ready for real life without your duvet of chemicals?
Yeah.
That was the seed of my career. There's the recovery coaching, but I did my recovery skills group in the NHS in London for 22 years. And I coordinated all the detoxes for Kensington, Chelsea and Westminster for 20 years. But my gig was, come in, we'll detox you. But all the medical profession are going to do, they're going to take the booze and dope out of your system. Then the work starts. So I would undercover, not as AA or anything like that, but I bring in recovering people to give them a talk.
Yeah.
None of this. And then I'd say, well, they'll detox you, but what are you going to do afterwards? So that was, what a lucky, I'm blessed. And I did understand that I had a gift, but people, older, wiser people in the NHS spotted it, and I got funded as an experiment, and they had to create a role for me, because when I first started, they had to pay me as a clerk, because there was no title. So it was invented, David Charkham, life skills facilitator, patient coordinator, CNWL, mental health trust. So, it's a kind of, I guess it's a lot more rewarding. My acting wasn't bad, but it wasn't great.
Well, you've saved lives. You've helped save lives, and that's must be an incredible feeling to know that you've done that for so many people, so many years. How did you? How did that work alongside the work you did with very high-profile people, as we talked about, stars and high net worth people that you work with?
It actually worked really well, because what I do is I'd be part-time in the NHS, so Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And Monday I'd be working in St Mary's, Paddington, at the real cliff face of homeless addicts and alcoholics. It was really, rock bottom. And on Tuesday I could be on a private jet with an artist flying to a TV show or some performance somewhere, get back that night, and back in the NHS on Wednesday. So that gave me, I believe, a wonderful grounding, because the thing working with the high profile people, I don't know whether some people think some of their fame's going to rub off on them, or it's going to be good for their career. I don't have any desire to be in the limelight. I think that's what helped people approach me who knew I'd been a performer. I wasn't interested in the fame side of it.
And how did that sort of work come about, David? Was that just
reputation and reputation? They knew I'd been people that I knew. I mean, I'm a good communicator. I'm not. I think they knew. I think they knew I was a safe pair of hands, actually. And I had no other agenda. And they may have seen me, or indeed people that were my clients from 1988. Some of those people that came out of rehab with nothing, some of them, quite a few of them, have gone on to very kind of important positions, whether it's in the world of recovery or the entertainment or business. And some of them contacted me because they knew that I was able to. I mean, when I went to China, it was very hard to translate. No one could understand what I did. And the only way they could translate what I did was, you are a hope giver. So I've been a hope giver. And so I gave to these people that were coming out of rehab with nothing, who were very successful. And I would remember my life skills. They called me the miracle man, not because I was a miracle, but whenever I walked into a room full of quite nervous, frightened people who had just come out of rehab, that look of a rabbit caught in the headlights, I'd look at everyone in the eye and say, look, you're bloody miracles. The reality is, I say, well, what would have happened if you hadn't stopped?
Yeah. When you're with an individual and you're on tour, as you've described, what is the day-to-day? Do you have a system or a routine that you try to stick with? Or are you there as a sounding board or a motivator? What's the main part of your role?
You've covered all of that, but wherever we go in the world, I would have known that whether I could be in Moscow or Manhattan or, I don't know, Wellington or Bangkok, that at 12 o'clock where the meeting is, or even Abu Dhabi, where the meeting is. And with some of those people, you can't just say, jump in the car. You've got to get security. And sometimes security would have to go ahead and check the route and all that stuff. And you just get into a groove. That's what you do. But yes, the sound is cool. And some people are really quite nervous before they go on. And some people might need some support in just some quiet time after a performance. It can be very mood altering, that stuff. So you said everything you said.
Okay.
That's really, really it. And of course, not forgetting to look after myself.
Yes. That must be difficult when you're away because it's exhausting. There's all sorts of triggers, I imagine.
The last big sort of world tour I did with someone my age, so that wasn't bad. It wasn't sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was kind of oxygen tanks,
Right.
a bit of hair dye, one of those pills for the drummer in case he had a heart attack. But with the younger artists, I said, well, I'm okay to maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. But I didn't. Oh no, I did one in America a couple of years ago, and I can't do all nighters. But if the artist is freaking out, they can call me 24/7. Of course they can.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just need to be at every party.
yeah. You worked with the Osbournes, of course.
Yes, I had a wonderful time. But Ozzy, I met when I was in a show that you got to be really, really old to know. If I said it, I started it was in black and white television. It was called Crossroads.
Oh, Crossroads, of course.
They filmed in Birmingham at Aston Studios. And in those days, you were young actors and you'd hang out in the local club, the Rum Runner, it was called. And some of Sabbath would be there and some of the Move would be there. And we kind of hung out. And then in the 70s, I think we probably had the same suppliers. And then when I met him, we remembered, and also I'd been at stage school because Sharon had been a child actor. So I kind of knew them a bit, but we got on from the minute we met. We're the same age. Ozzy has the most wonderful sense of humor, and there's all the image and all the madness, but deep down, for me, they're both very kind, very generous, decent human beings. So I had a wonderful time touring and working with them around the world and in America and indeed here. So we got on from the word go, actually.
With artists like that, and you're trying to keep them on a slight straight and narrow, do you ever have to be quite harsh? Do you ever have to be strict and put your foot down?
Well, that's a very good question, because part of it is if you want to use, I'm not here as a preventative. I'm here to support you. I can talk it through okay, you want to use, but let's take a moment to roll the tape forward. If they're in a frame of mind to receive this kind of information, let's say you use and then what, and I take them on the journey. But if they really want to use, then I love the saying, remember, you can carry the message, you can't carry the alcoholic.
Yeah.
But that's the way I work. Other people may work differently. Interventionists can get involved. But you're on tour and the number one person screws up. You are talking about the ramifications of not just one person. You think about all the people that are employed.
And has that happened to you, on a big tour?
It hasn't happened to me. I think if I hadn't have been discerning on a couple of invites to join people, it could have. But I've been able to, my antennae are fairly good where I've turned down work. And, they say, oh, yeah, sure, you can fly in a private jet, blah, 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 stay in the presidential suites, blah, 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 earn loads of money. But if someone doesn't really want it, I don't, what can I do? I can carry the message. And then I'll say, look, I'm going, but you know where I am if you want to talk.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there might be nowadays, I don't know, but it was we were making it up as we went along, sort of legally. But nowadays there might be a clause in a contract saying if the artist chooses to use, then the sober companion can walk away. It's much more sort of legal, and because of imagine what kind of legal problems could happen if you cancelled a tour and you're sold out. And 100 to 200,000 people have paid for their tickets. It's about what happens with the insurance and who might get sued.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have a night off and go on a bender. I know we're pushing the time. Can I just mention the cabin?
Yes, that was my next question. So you retired from the NHS? Oh,
I retired gracefully.
Right.
I didn't get a silver clock, but I got a gift from them. What a gift it was. Not gift, but I mean, what a joy to work with it. And I ended up being seconded into another drug service, a local drug service. And to make the circle complete, one of my first clients from 25 years before was my boss when I ended up in my NHS role.
Oh, wow.
So, he was one of my success stories. So I retired from that. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And then I was able to do more of the touring stuff, devote time to the Outside Edge Theatre, which perhaps you can add a link to the Outside
I'll
Edge.
put that's a fantastic organisation that helps.
It's a wonderful charity. So it's edgetc.org, and I work with Jimmy Page, Pierce Brosnan, and Mark Rylance, who are the patrons, to support people who are interested in the arts, totally free of charge. You can drop in either live or on Zoom. So anyway, I'm sure you'll add that.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds absolutely brilliant.
I'm at London. I've left London. I live a fairly quiet life in Wiltshire, but I've never lost my enthusiasm for the cabin in Chiang Mai in Thailand. It's a wonderful project. It's not the sort of top Swiss clinic where it's £250,000 for a week. It's quite modest. It's quite humble. I like the Thai way of life. I like the people. I like the food. I like the Buddhist attitude. And it's a place. There's an alternative to a priory or somewhere like that where people can go and have some treatment, but also some downtime, to time to reflect. And there, as you may know, they use equine therapy in Europe quite a lot. There they do work with elephants, and they work with orphanages, and they have Thai monks that come in, and if they want to, they can do meetings. It's a great setup. I mean, again, when I started, there was 3. There's probably about 14 in Thailand, including some on rather idyllic islands. But this is staffed by highly qualified professionals. So that's my. Well, there's no plug, but I'm proud to be involved with the cabin because I've seen it evolve. So that's part of my. Maybe I'm out there a couple of times a year, but I'm living kind of quietly here in Wiltshire.
Beautiful Wiltshire, the Cotswolds.
I'm just the other side of Shaftesbury. I mean, I'm a London born and bred, but I'm cool here. A bit bloody cold in the winter, but I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, I know there's some good recovery community in that part of the world. I know some of them myself.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Hope to bump into you.
David, it's a real pleasure and honour to meet you, and fantastic. I thank you so much for sharing your story and for telling us these fascinating insights to an incredible life. And I wish you all the best going forward with it. And we'll check out all your work with the cabin, with Outside Edge, and I'll put links to all of that stuff in the bio here.
Well, it's great to meet you, Sam, and do come to wonderful downtown Shaftesbury. If you're passing wonderful downtown Shaftesbury,
I'll pop by. I'll pop by for sure. Excellent. David, thank you. That was David Charkham, addiction recovery coach, motivational speaker, actor, legend. If you want links to find out about his work, whether that be with the cabin or the Outside Edge Theatre Company, they're all in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to The Reset if you don't do so already. You can find it all at samdelaney.substack.com. A whole archive of over 100 episodes of this podcast, plus numerous newsletters and other stuff too. Get involved. That's it for this week, gang. Thanks for listening as always. And remember, don't let the dickheads get you down.